Today we're going to discuss the carbon cycle. And most of you are probably familiar with it. You probably did a lot of this in early or in the middle school. So, carbon is a key element for life, composing almost half of the dry mass of the Earth's plants. That is the mass when all water is removed. Carbon is also referred to as organic. Anything that is organic is considered to have carbon, and anything inorganic like water, it's just H2O, doesn't have carbon in it, so it would be an inorganic substance. The basis of the earth found in rocks, oceans, and the atmosphere. Most of you there, you see the little picture there, most of you is water, but a surprising part of the rest of you is carbon. This is you without water, a lump of carbon. Same carbon atoms are used repeatedly on Earth. They cycle between the Earth and the atmosphere. Plants use carbon dioxide. Most are familiar with this through the process of photosynthesis, in which plants make food, which is a sugar, which is carbon. It's C6H12O6 is a glucose molecule, which is sugar. It's used to make, and a byproduct of this is something that humans need, and that's oxygen is released also in this process. The carbon becomes part of the plant or stored food as that sugar molecule. And you'll look at there's 3 different types of sugars that are considered. There's monosaccharides, disaccharides, and complex carbohydrates. Animals eat plants. When organisms eat plants, they take in the carbon, and some of it becomes part of their own bodies. When plants and animals die, most of their bodies are decomposed and carbon atoms are returned to the atmosphere. Some are not decomposed fully and end up in deposits underground, like oil, coal, and etc. And these are the ones that take some time in order to, with the right pressure and the right conditions, to process or make oil or petroleum. Carbon in rocks and underground deposits is released very slowly into the atmosphere. This process takes many years. Carbon cycle is the exchange of carbon among 3 reservoirs or storage places: the land, the ocean, and the atmosphere. And probably out of most of those, we really don't think about it being in the oceans and even in the land, but we hear about it in the atmosphere all the time. The global carbon cycle is usually thought to have 4 major carbon sinks interconnected by pathways of exchange. These sinks are the atmosphere, terrestrial, biosphere, which usually includes the freshwater systems and non-living organic materials such as soil and carbon. The oceans, which includes dissolved inorganic carbon and living and non-living marine biota, and the sediments, which include fossil fuels. Here you see a diagram, and this is what you'll see when you Google a diagram of the carbon cycle. Some of the causes there of releasing CO2 in the atmosphere is combustion. It doesn't show a picture of a volcano, but that also releases a lot of CO2 in the atmosphere. It doesn't show the process of respiration, which animals and humans give off CO2. But here you see the process of fossil fuels, how that after decomp that fossil fuels can be made through the carbon cycle. The trees taking in the CO2 and the sunlight, and it also has to have water, which releases the sugar, which I discussed, like glucose before, and O2 is given off. And then there's the respiration. It didn't show any humans down there, but anyway, humans take in that sugar, they take in that oxygen, and they release CO2 and water. When you breathe on a mirror, you'll see the water respiration there given off, and also ATP, which is formed during respiration, which humans have to have for their cells in order to keep their metabolism going. And diffusion a lot of times we don't understand how that actually works, but when something goes from a high concentration to an area of low concentration, so CO2 is high in the atmosphere, it will dissolve into the ocean, which has a low concentration, and then it will sometimes settle and it will be used as shells and things like that for things in the ocean. Here it shows the reservoirs, the magnitudes of the reservoirs actively cycling CO2 in gigatons of carbon of the ocean pool. Roughly 1,000 gigatons are in contact with the atmosphere in any given decade. The terrestrial biosphere consists of soil and vegetation. And if you look there, the ocean is 93% of carbon reservoirs. And we don't even hardly discuss that one when we're talking about global warming and global climate change. The atmospheric cycle. Atmospheric carbon is mainly carbon dioxide, which is CO2, aided by aerobic respiration, which that's us breathing, animals breathing, volcanic action, and burning fossil fuels. And then this CO2 is removed by photosynthesis. And it's also removed a lot of plankton and stuff. People don't realize that a lot of those in there in the ocean actually take in CO2 and release oxygen into our atmosphere. Carbon is a greenhouse gas, and what that means, a greenhouse gas impedes the escape of heat from the Earth's surface and makes life on Earth possible. If we didn't have the greenhouse gases, you wouldn't be able to live here on Earth. And what is happening in this climate change, or what some people say with global warming, the more CO2 is produced in, that means when the sunlight comes in and reflects off the Earth, then some of it won't be able to escape, therefore increasing the temperature here on Earth and depleting of the icebergs and things like that in the North and South Pole. There's been some study here lately saying that this is just a natural effect, and then there's others. This was really brought about in the early 90s by Al Gore, saying that we needed to really cut back, and I'm saying that we do need to watch about the pollution that we give off and the amounts of CO2, but I don't know if it's just a natural phenomenon that's happening or taking place, or we're actually contributing to global warming. Greenhouse effect: as heat builds up in the lower atmosphere, the Earth's temperature rises. A lot of times this can be depicted like when clouds roll in. A lot of times, they'll be calling for snow in the winter, and then the clouds roll in, that's going to produce the snow. When the clouds roll in, they're a little lower, so they actually heat up the temperature between the Earth and those clouds, and sometimes we don't get the snow, we get rain because the temperature rises. Well, that's how the greenhouse gases actually work. When that CO2, it actually traps those heat, the rays in from the sun, so it doesn't let all of it escape. Anthropogenic activities which upset the carbon cycle, including burning of fossil fuels and deforestation. Fossil fuels such as oil, coal, and natural gas are the fossilized remains of prehistoric plants and animals and represent stored carbon. Here you see the emissions of carbon in the industry: 20%. Electricity generation, meaning they're burning most coal to produce most. I think I saw a thing like 60% of still of our electricity is produced by the burning of coal, and a lot of you probably think it's windmills or water, but it's still producing burning of fossil fuels. And then the other side of that is we go to electric cars and how we're still producing most of our electricity through the burning of fossil fuels. So I don't know if that's a win-win or not. You'll see residential, that means us, and commercial, transportation. Used to there was 1 or 2 cars per household, now there's 3 or 4 on average. The cycle repeats over and over and over.